Let's get on to the next hand. Okay, I think I liked what I saw here for the most part, so let's go through this. Pre-flop, unless someone has questions, I don't think there's much to be said here. It looks pretty standard to me. And then Gaddy has a decision when he faces an ace-high flop, and this is a somewhat common situation when we 3-bet kings and an ace-high comes. So we decide to check. Gaddy, can you step me through here, please?
Yeah. I don't think ace is gonna fold. So unless I want to apply pressure and make ace fold in the continue stages, which he might have like ace queen or ace jack that's called in this position. So I'm thinking I'm encouraging him to bluff, and I might call one street. So this is my reasoning.
All right, and that's totally a fine strategy. A second strategy that you could potentially use here would be, I think, similar to what Aaron would use here based on the last hand, where we can bet everything that we 3-bet with for a small size. Probably something like $14, something like a third pot. If we do use this strategy, the reason for that is that by sizing down, we're encouraging the button to peel with more worse hands than he would have to, than if he faced like a normal bet of, $20, $24. Because yes, he's going to have a lot of aces, but he has to continue a lot more hands than just aces in order for him not get overbluffed. Like he has to continue like all of his pocket pairs, all of his like 8-7 suits, hands that contain a 7. 6-5 suited, 5-4 suited, even some king highs like king queen and king jack. And if he's folding any of the hands that I just listed, he is simply folding too much, and we should be betting small every single time because he's going to be folding too much and we're auto profiting.
Bottom of your range of calling button versus big blind 3-bet with like king 6 be the bottom of your range, 5-3 suited.
I'm somewhat tight from the button against big blind. In general, I find that a lot of players don't 3-bet from the big blind enough. So I'm somewhat overfolding.
So like you can defend. So it's more like, yeah, big blind's kind of like defending more and like less 3-betting because they're getting an awesome price, and the small blind's 3-betting the button way more. Like 100.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm definitely continuing.
Like king 10 suited here for your bottom of your button versus big blind call range then.
It would probably be something like that. Like in all honesty, if I had to like give an estimate as to what I would probably call in this particular spot, I mean, suited connectors just play so well. Pretty much every. Yeah, board coverage for those. Suited aces just also play like pretty well. And then like once we get into like the 1-gapper territory, 2-gapper territory, like all the like
their player profile then in their tendencies, and then if they 3-bet way too much. Like if they're 3-betting like a little bit tighter from the big blind, then I'm not really wanting to be calling with 8, 5, 9, 6.
Yeah, exactly. And the same can be said for stuff like. And the same would be said with stuff like.
Suited aces would be only at bottom like ace 10, ace jack then.
Yeah, so I would be calling a bit wider against the small blind than I would the big blind.
You have a 4-bet bluff here and only 4-bet aces, ace king suited and ace king off. And with weighted like kings to a 4-bet.
Button versus big blind. I usually start out with just value, and then if I find that people are folding to my 4-bets a bunch, then I just start adding in appropriate bluffs. And honestly, whichever combos you choose, it doesn't really matter as long as you got the frequencies in check. Like as long as you know that this is your value range for 4-betting, and this you say like, okay, queen jack off and king 10 off my 4-bet bluffs, for example. I don't really care which ones, as long as you just pick one if people are folding the 4-bets.
One or two, yeah, just to kind of balance that shit out.
Yeah. So anyway, guy decides to check, and Looser decides to check behind. Can you step me through your thought process?
I have pot control. My kicker is a 5. I got backdoor flush draws, so I can really kind of play a turn in river and see if he'll take a stab at it too, to kind of represent like ace king, ace queen, top of his range. So really, I'm in position, and I don't really want to inflate the pot on the flop and get bet and then turn check through, and then river. It's like, okay, what do I do? I could kind of, I don't know. Could I size here? Could I bet here, small, and then take a free turn?
You pretty much have options to either bet small or check here. I'm leaning towards the check option for pretty much everything that you said. If I could click a like button over your avatar profile, I would do it right now. And then we get to the turn. Gaddy checks. I think that is pretty self-explanatory. And then we decide to bet 15 here. I think we have a couple of options here, so let's go through this. By we go through this, I mean Looser, go into your decision here.
But the sizing is just kind of like, I want like jacks plus the call here, the street. If he does have it, he feels quite controlling. And I'm still beat by like ace king, ace queen, so I don't really want to wall. I could bet smaller. I could bet like 28, 29 too, and then check river. Couple options.
So,
or if he folds, if he gives up a little bit easier, then I can just kind of like, yeah, this little small stab, I can do it with my whole range then. If he gives up, if I know his tendency is now like ace dry boards 3-bet pot, like blind versus button, and if I stab small and he gives up so easily without defending, then I can just fucking ragdoll him and do this my whole.
With other hands, I would like this small sizing. With our specific hand, I kind of like going bigger. There were a couple options that I think are a bit off. For one, I don't think anyone really checks ace king or ace queen here twice after 3-betting. I think that if for some reason they decide to check the flop, which I think is almost rare to none, for those rare to none times, they're always betting the turn because they want to build a pot because they know they have the best hand. So I think that
in a vacuum.
Yeah, so when Gaddy checks a second time, I think his best hand is probably going to be exactly this, and maybe pocket aces. Like, that's probably the only realistic slow play we can see here. But I think we have the best hand here 95% of the time here, if not more. And when he has, like, he's going to kings, queens, jacks, tens a lot. And even if he faces a bet of 30, he checked twice, and you just check back the flop. You can be perceived to have just a lot of random stuff. Because people can take like just one-shot stabs and then be done. So in the big blind shoes, they're pretty much, if they check twice with a pocket pair that's bigger than, like an 8 or a 9, they're not check folding in this spot. So we can like lock in one big bet on the turn, and then we can even go 2 streets with this hand because he's going to have kings through 10 so often here in this spot, and it's going to be in a horrendous spot. So Gaddy check calls, and then
yeah. So I had thinking to do check raise here because I encouraged bluff on my second check.
Okay. Can you go through your thought process on like why you want to check raise and then why you decide to check call?
No, I'm not sure. No. So. Maybe for several seconds I thought to make check raise after I did the check, right? So and then I didn't have the guts to do it.
Okay, for what it's worth, anytime you have like a good hand like this and it's like strong enough and you can beat bluffs, there's no need to turn stuff like this into a bluff. Like in almost any scenario, it's just that's what I would call fancy play syndrome. I think check call is the very standard play, especially when you face this size. Because Looser can certainly have like some random stabs here that we always beat, and kings are just too strong to fold. at this point. And then Gad decides to check the river, which I think is really standard. And Lucid decides to check back. So let's break this down here. That means you, loser.
Yeah, I was just checking back. I got showdown value. I could bet small again. If I did the small sizing on the turn, then I could like even just thinly bust out my violin and play the world's smallest thin value bet of like 25, 20, get like a crying call. But if I'm faced with a jam, it'd be kind of like, yeah, weird too. I'm only going to get called by hands that beat me, but like I could size smaller again just because I size smaller on the turn. If I would have bet 31, 32 on the turn, then I'm checking back river.
So a spot like this is actually really interesting because your hand is actually way stronger than what it looks like because of the action on the flop and turn. Because he checked twice, we pretty much agreed that he never has ace king or ace queen. I would go even further to say he just doesn't have an ace because weaker aces aren't really going to be 3-betting from the big blind here. So when the flop goes check, check, and then he check calls the turn, I think we still have the best hand here, at like over 90% of the time here. I can't even think of a single ace that he can have that would make sense to take this line. So, and if he faces even like a larger bet here of like 52, 54, he's going to be in a really, really tough spot. Hands like that or like kings, queens, jacks, tens, they're going to be tempted to call because they check twice because they know that they look weak in this hand. So you call it a really thin value bet. I think it's a very standard value bet to put in here, and it's specifically because of what happened on the flop and the turn that you can get away with using a larger sizing.
Turn, yeah, and like you said, you'd bet his ace king, etc., all the stronger aces on the turn.
Right.
Let's put mine in there and start building a pot and get value for that.
Exactly, but it's just tough to remember the information that you get from a check because we know how to break down what happens when we're facing a bet, but when people check, that's a lot of information that's given to us too, where people don't slow play enough. People don't slow play like good hands. They slow play top set, but that's about it. So we can break down, okay, he has kings through tens a lot, therefore we can bet big, and he has to call some of the time. Otherwise, if they're not calling with kings, we can just bluff our ass off here. Just take jack 10 and just start piling. And he'll be folding every single time because if kings and jacks, tens fold, that's like 90% of his range. And I want to bluff it all the time.
I have a question actually.
All right. And that'll be the last question before I move on to the next hand.
Yeah, regarding this hand, I mean, my line as the button would be probably check back the flop, maybe 3/4 bet the turn, and river would be something around half pot, I'm guessing. I'm kind of curious what would your optimal line would be. I mean, what would you do in this scenario as a button?
3/4 pot I would like on the turn. And then on the river, it depends on my opponent. I think anywhere from half pot to 3/4 pot is fine. If I felt like people in general are not calling rivers against me, then I would size down to half pot. Against people that are like, against the vast majority of people, I would start with 3/4 pot and just see if they're calling me because they have to call at some frequency. And if I see that they're folding too much, 3/4 pot is now going to be my bluff size, and I'll size down when I actually have a hand like this.
Yeah, makes sense.